I still remember that night like it was carved into my chest. The sound of rain against the window, the faint smell of my mom's perfume in the hallway, and the way everything in our house suddenly felt wrong. If someone had told me a few months earlier that my family would fall apart because of a secret, I wouldn't have believed them. I used to think my stepdad was the kind of man who could never hurt us. He came into our lives when I was 12, after my real dad left. For a long time, he felt like the missing piece my mom and I needed. He was kind, thoughtful, the kind of man who'd fix my bike before I even asked, or surprise my mom with coffee on Sundays. I called him Tom. It felt strange at first, calling another man anything close to dad, but over time, it just became natural. He was always there, for both of us, and maybe that's why what happened later broke me so deeply. It wasn't just betrayal, it was disbelief, the kind that shatters everything you think you know about love, loyalty, and trust. The first sign came so quietly that I almost ignored it. My mom had started working longer hours at the hospital, picking up extra shifts. Tom, who worked mostly from home, would always be the one waiting for her when she returned, or at least that's what I thought. One evening, I came home early from college. My class had been canceled, and I walked into a house that was too quiet. The living room lights were dim, and I remember thinking it was weird because Tom usually blasted the TV when he was home alone. I called out, "Tom," no answer. Then I heard it faint laughter, a woman's laughter that it was coming from the garage. At first, I froze. Maybe he was watching something on his phone, I told myself, but curiosity, or maybe instinct, pushed me toward the sound. I walked slowly, heart pounding, every step heavier than the last. When I opened the garage door just an inch, I saw him, and my world stopped. He wasn't alone. He was standing close to someone I didn't recognize at first, a woman with her hair tied back, laughing softly as she brushed her hand against his arm. It was subtle, but it was enough. The way he looked at her, the smile he gave, wasn't friendly. It was familiar, intimate. I didn't say anything. I just stepped back, closed the door quietly, and went to my room like nothing had happened. That night, I couldn't sleep. My heart was racing, my mind spinning. I kept trying to convince myself I misunderstood what I saw. Maybe she was a coworker. Maybe it was harmless, but something inside me knew the truth. The next few days were torture. I watched him closely, every smile, every text notification, every time he stepped outside to make a quick call. I noticed things I'd never noticed before. The way he'd suddenly change his shirt before my mom came home, the faint smell of perfume that wasn't hers, the fact that he'd started locking his phone, something he never used to do. My mom, sweet and trusting as ever, didn't see any of it. She was exhausted from work, always rushing between shifts, and whenever she was home, she just seemed grateful to have him there. I hated it. I hated watching her kiss him goodnight while I knew something wasn't right. A week later, the truth hit me harder than I could have imagined. Tom had told my mom he'd be working late on a project and wouldn't be home until after midnight. Mom believed him. Of course, she always did, but something about that night felt off. So I decided to follow him. It sounds crazy now, but at that moment, I needed to know. I needed to stop pretending that the whispers in my head weren't real. He left around 7 p.m., dressed up more than usual. I waited a few minutes, grabbed my car keys, and followed. My hands were shaking on the wheel. I told myself I was just being paranoid, but deep down, I already knew what I was going to find. He drove across town, to a quiet area filled with small restaurants and bars. I parked a few spaces behind and watched as he got out. A few minutes later, the same woman from the garage appeared. She looked happy, too happy when she saw him, and then they hugged. Not a quick, friendly hug, a long one. He touched her face like he'd done that 1,000 times before. I remember gripping the steering wheel so hard my fingers went numb. Tears blurred my vision, and I couldn't even breathe. I watched them go inside together, laughing like nothing in the world could touch them. That was the night I realized the man I thought was family, the man who raised me, was living a double life. I drove home that night in silence, crying the entire way. I didn't know what to do. Should I tell my mom? Should I confront him? Should I just pretend I didn't see it? Part of me wanted to scream at him. Another part of me just wanted to protect my mom from the heartbreak I knew was coming. For 2 days, I didn't say a word. I barely ate, barely slept. My mom noticed, of course. She asked what was wrong, but I couldn't bring myself to say it then. Everything changed one afternoon. Tom came home early, earlier than usual. He looked nervous, distracted. He went straight to the shower without saying much. When he left his phone on the counter, I saw a message pop up. It was from her. Last night was amazing. I can't stop thinking about you. My heart stopped. There it was, proof. No more doubts, no more guessing. I stood there, shaking, staring at his phone, until I heard the water stop running. I quickly put it down and ran to my room. I cried until my eyes hurt. I hated him for doing this to my mom, for ruining everything we had, but I also hated myself for knowing the truth and saying nothing. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to tell my mom, but I had no idea what kind of storm that truth would bring into our home. The night I decided to tell my mom, it felt like my chest was collapsing under the weight of my own heartbeat. I kept replaying every memory of Tom in my mind, the way he smiled at her, the way he called her his everything, the way he used to tell me that love meant never lying. And now, that same man was lying every single day under our roof. My mom was sitting on the couch, still in her scrubs, her hair tied back, exhaustion written all over her face. She smiled when she saw me walk in, a gentle, tired smile that made my throat tighten. "Hey, sweetheart," she said softly. "You okay? You've been quiet lately." I sat down beside her, hands trembling. My eyes filled up before I could even speak. "Mom," I whispered, "there's something I need to tell you." She looked at me, confused. "What's wrong?" And that's when the words came out, broken, shaky, but real. "It's Tom. He's been seeing someone else." The silence that followed was unbearable. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the rain outside, the soft inhale of my mother trying to process what she just heard. She blinked a few times, as if I'd said something impossible. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling. I told her everything, the garage, the night I followed him, the message I saw on his phone. Every detail burned my throat as I spoke. For a while, she just sat there, staring at the wall. Then, quietly, she said, No, he wouldn't do that. Tom wouldn't do that." I wanted so badly to agree with her. I wanted to believe it was all a mistake. But deep down, we both knew the truth. Her hands started shaking. She stood up and walked away, into the kitchen, pacing like someone trying to wake up from a nightmare. I followed her, but she didn't look at me. "I have to see it for myself," she said finally. "I can't just take someone's word, even yours, not for something like this." That hurt, but I understood. When you love someone that deeply, denial becomes your only defense. The next evening, she told Tom she'd be working a night shift, but she didn't go to work. Instead, she followed him. I stayed home, pacing the floor, praying that I was wrong, praying that somehow, this whole thing would turn out to be a misunderstanding. But when she came back that night, I knew. Her face was pale, her eyes red. She walked past me without a word, straight to her bedroom. I could hear the sound of drawers opening, the faint sound of her crying. Then, a crash, something breaking. I ran to the doorway and saw her standing there, holding one of their wedding photos. The glass was shattered across the floor. "He did it," she whispered. "He really did it." There's something soul-crushing about watching your parents' heart break. My mom had always been the strongest person I knew, the kind of woman who carried everything on her back and still smiled. But that night, she wasn't strong. She was just human, broken. Tom came home an hour later, whistling like nothing was wrong. When he saw the photo on the floor, he froze. "What happened?" he asked, his voice shaky. My mom looked at him, tears streaming down her face. "You tell me," she said coldly. For a moment, he didn't say anything. Then he sighed, like a man who'd been caught and didn't want to pretend anymore. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. That was it. No excuses. No denial. Just a few empty words that meant nothing. Mom laughed bitterly. "You're sorry. After everything I gave you, after everything we built." He tried to explain, to say he didn't mean for it to happen, that he still loved her, but none of it mattered. You can't unbreak something once it's shattered. I wanted to yell at him, to tell him he'd ruined everything, but the truth was, I didn't even have the energy. I just stood there, numb, watching the man I used to look up to turn into a stranger. He packed his things that night. No yelling, no begging, just silence. Before he left, he turned to me and said, "I'm sorry you had to see all this. I never wanted to hurt you." I didn't respond. I couldn't, because the truth was, he hadn't just hurt my mom, he'd hurt me too. He'd destroyed the only version of family I'd ever believed in. After he left, the house felt emptier than ever. His laughter, his shoes by the door, his coffee mug, everything was gone, but his absence still filled every room. The weeks that followed were quiet. My mom barely spoke, and I didn't push her. Sometimes I'd hear her crying at night, and I'd just sit outside her door, wishing I could take away her pain. Slowly, she began to heal. She started going for walks again, spending time with friends, even smiling once in a while. But I knew she'd never be the same. None of us would. One evening, months later, we were sitting together on the porch, watching the sunset. She turned to me and said, "You know, I used to think love was about holding on, no matter what. But now, I think sometimes love is knowing when to let go." I nodded, tears filling my eyes. That night, I went to bed thinking about how fragile trust really is, how it takes years to build and only seconds to break, and how sometimes the people we trust the most are the ones who can destroy us with a single choice. Tom never came back. I heard he moved to another city, started over. Maybe he regrets what he did. Maybe he doesn't, but it doesn't matter anymore, because what he left behind, the silence, the pain, the emptiness, became the foundation for something else. Strength. My mom and I learned to rebuild, just the two of us. It wasn't easy, but we made it through. And maybe that's what healing really is. Not forgetting what happened, but learning to live again in spite of it. Even now, years later, when I think of him, it's not anger that fills me anymore. It's sadness, because I realized something. People don't just destroy families by cheating, they destroy them by lying to themselves, by pretending love can survive without honesty. If you've ever had someone betray your trust, you know what it feels like, that ache in your chest, that disbelief, but you also know, you survive, you learn, you grow, and maybe one day, like us, you start to smile again, because pain doesn't last forever, but the lessons it leaves behind do. Don't forget to watch more stories like this.